Shana Tova, and it is amazing to be together. I want to thank our Torah readers and Haftarah, Kati reading the Haftarah, and Cheryl and Mara for reading the Torah, and everyone that had an Aliyah. The formula for a high holiday sermon is that I'm supposed to open with a joke or a lighthearted story, but to be honest with you, I'm not feeling it this year. It has been a hard year. Vitriol throughout politics, pandemic, conspiracy theories, fires across the West, economic collapse, racial inequity, protests, social confrontations, people dying in quarantine without family, isolation, depression, exhaustion, denial, navigating work and homeschooling, job loss, and so much more. I clench my teeth a lot. I get headaches. I sometimes feel so hunched over my computer screen that it's certainly adding to my physical stress. It's important for us to name it. It has been a really hard time, and while we go through the days trying to keep a good face about it, with half of our face masked, the truth is, I've heard more and more people saying, I'm getting by. I'm hanging in there. Now, it's supposed to be a response which doesn't draw attention, but I get it. We are at the grocery stores. We don't look at each other the same way now. The peppy music plays in the background, but we don't catch each other's eyes or say hello as easily as we simply think that a greeting might spread the virus. Not long ago, aisles were bare. So today, wherever you are, I'm grateful that you are here. I'm glad we're together. Of all the things you could be doing right now, I am grateful that we are connected in this way. No matter if you are dressed for Yontif, or in shorts, or wherever you are streaming, or listening to this while you're on a walk, all of this has been hard and scary, uncertain and disorienting. Almost 200,000 Americans have lost their lives to COVID-19 so far, and worldwide we are just shy of 1 million deaths. So I want to take a moment and recognize the devastation. And within Bethel, our own community, we have directly felt the results of the infection. COVID-19 is not a hoax. Science is not a hoax. The reason we are taking these extreme precautions by not praying together today is because we are protecting each other, and that is paramount. So I want to pause for a moment of silence in honor of those who have died due to the pandemic, and simultaneously to offer a silent prayer of appreciation for the frontline workers. Amen. During these months, we have leaned on so many different coping techniques. Going for walks, how many people have adopted a dog? Therapists are busy now, an extra glass of wine, and I do want to give a serious caution about the dangers of alcohol abuse, so if there are concerns, please talk to me or my fellow clergy. Of course, prescriptions for drugs for anxiety have skyrocketed. Landscapers are busy helping people improve their backyards. Houses are being bought and sold as people reconsider their space needs. And with the advice of a Bethel member who's a techie, I have a new Wi-Fi mesh network to cover every inch of my house for potential schooling for any Harris child, college, high school, middle school student, whatever is needed. And yes, of course, I have no idea what a Wi-Fi mesh network actually is. But of all the things that we have leaned on during these months, have you leaned on Judaism? Did you turn to Judaism to help guide you or gird you through these difficult times? It sounds trite, but that is what Judaism is here for. Judaism is much more than what happens in a prayer book or a sanctuary. We are proving every day that Judaism reaches further than the property line on Old Georgetown Road. But have you turned to Judaism during this crisis? It is so easy to overlook that question. Here we are in Rosh Hashanah to turn towards faith. We have been living in a global pandemic with social unrest and economic roller coaster, but the idea of leaning on our faith over these months may have only been a fleeting thought. What does Judaism have to offer at a time like this? You may say Judaism is important, but it is not going to get me an extra canister of Clorox wipes or supervise my kids' online learning. True, but that's not what we're turning to Judaism for. So what should we be looking for from our faith at a time like this? The 11th century commentator Bachya ibn Pakuda wrote in his book Duties of the Heart, Chovavot HaLevavot, about a treasure that was buried in his yard. It's a treasure people had forgotten about, but awareness of it got passed on from generation to generation. Finally, someone went out and searched for the treasure. They found it, but it was dirty, neglected. It didn't look special at first. But Bachya continues, as the dirt was brushed away and the objects were handled more, the valuable nature of the treasure revealed itself. Neglected, it was just buried junk. But cared for, invested in, polished, the beauty was revealed. Bachya explains, this is Judaism as well. While Judaism always has its intrinsic value, unless we use it and care for it, Judaism will not be recognized as a treasure by others or even by ourselves. A passed over, dusty faith. That is what Bachya's powerful description and caution of 1,000 years ago was. For many, it may be accurate for today. Judaism, it may be part of a layered aesthetic for a person or family, but it may not be a core aspect of them. This has occurred in part because we've stopped expecting big things from Judaism. We've stopped expecting big things from faith. We've allowed our relationship to Judaism, and by extension our synagogue, to become a transactional encounter rather than a transformational one. Transactional, not transformational. Think about it. For many, we have allowed synagogues to become a place where we have exchanges, membership for services, sometimes literally for religious services, but also membership for education services, life cycle services, community services. When we no longer need these services, we end our membership because it's a transaction. Much has been written by sociologists of American religion on this shift. But at times like this, times that we are in now, circumstances shine a light on the limits of this type of exchange. While we understand the modern services we expect from religious institutions, we have become distant from the transformational possibilities of Judaism. We have stopped expecting that Judaism has the ability to change us, to shape our character, to define our morals and values, to root us in life, and to inspire us to see beyond the horizon. Judaism has transformational power. Abraham Joshua Heschel speaks of Judaism transforming time into Shabbat. David Hartman teaches that a story of peoplehood transforms into a seder about justice and overcoming oppression and freedom. The prophet Job teaches about transforming loneliness and hardship into fellowship. Hannah of the Haftarah transforms despair from infertility into solidarity with us. And the psalmist transforms hopelessness into the knowledge that tomorrow, or at least tomorrow's tomorrow, will be better than today. It is time to brush off Bachya's treasure. We have so much that needs transformation within ourselves and within our nation. For a number of reasons, I've been open to challenging questions and my own transformation. I've always had the benefit of being able to sidestep hard questions of economic and racial equality. I say benefit because in my daily life, I'm not forced to think about race. I walk through life as a white man who is Jewish, and many other descriptors, but how I move through the world, or more specifically, how I move through the cloistered section of Montgomery County, is easy. I have no worries. I expect that the spaces I walk into will be similar to me, and importantly, not threatening to me. I was recently talking to a teenager who's a new driver, and she was telling me a list of rules which were clearly not on the driver's test, but seemed like wisdom gained. Only park under lights. Do not park too close to another car because someone may be ready to get you. As you approach your car, look in the back seat to make sure someone's not hiding inside. The list went on, and I told her these sounded important. I had not thought of these things. I asked her if these were rules from being a young woman, or because I know that she watches too many scary police dramas on TV. Her answer was that she needs to think about these things because she's a woman, and a little bit from her police dramas. I told her that being a man, I've not often thought about this. It is certainly not in my daily consciousness, but for her, a degree of concern and fear of navigating the world is already ingrained. I started asking myself, what other subtle but real benefits do I gain by being a white man? Or put another way, what do I not have to spend a moment of time worrying about because of my race or gender? I rarely think of myself in these terms. I just am. Nobody challenges me because of my sex, my race, my sexual orientation, my social class, or my education. As I travel through life, I encounter very little friction in these areas. Without even noticing, I have been lulled to believe that others' lives must also be frictionless. Of course, I'm wrong. George Floyd and Breonna Taylor were preceded by Rodney King and so many others. Quarantine has allowed me to reflect on the protests which have been occurring. I have gone to a few to listen, to hear, and feel the emotions, to be open to the stories and pain and experiences of others. We model our own lives on how we grew up, and my family was very open and generous and progressive and proud. We served meals at soup kitchens on occasion, volunteered for causes, and donated food throughout the synagogue. Tikkun Olam was the centerpiece of my family's values. All of those lessons shaped me, and I hope have shaped my kids as well. But we remained primarily within our white Jewish circles. Nothing was ever said explicitly, but the reality was that most of my friends were like me. My parents' friends who I encountered looked like me. My school mainly looked like me. In Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, there are many sections I'm continuing to absorb and think about. It took me some time to appreciate how she's pressing us in many ways. It was not necessarily new ground, but I think I'm finally able to hear this more deeply. She describes how we have an implicit desire to see ourselves as good. It is a natural tendency, but we craft our story to put ourselves in the good and righteous category, probably more than we deserve. Many have written about how people over-report themselves doing good behaviors and under-report doing bad behaviors. Some call this the halo effect. But DiAngelos writes that too often people create an extreme dichotomy because they do not support explicit acts of segregation and white superiority, then they must be good. Since I'm not obviously bad, I think of myself as good. I do not tell racially colored jokes or diminish others. I'm an ally for protecting and expanding civil rights, especially as they've been so blatantly under attack recently. I see myself as on the side of John Lewis, crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and not County Sheriff Jim Clark, who released the dogs and the batons and the water cannons on the marchers. But the real story is not the extremes of either you are a Klan member burning a cross or in a drum circle with daisies in your hair. I like the reassurance of aligning myself with the side of moral goodness, but bias is not always explicit. When I give a true accounting of how I grew up and the life I have shaped today, it feels separated from others. Not segregated because of signs above water fountains or explicit real estate covenants. We have moved beyond that era. It's been created by subtle choices that I've made in my own life, I realize. We give it the cute name of the Bethesda bubble, but what it really means is predominantly uniformed racial and economic profile of my neighbors and friends. What was hidden and is now realized is that while the shapes and profiles of bigotry have shifted, bigotry remains. It does not look like holding torches in Charlottesville and hate being given oxygen by elected officials. The gentle decisions I make in my daily life for myself and for my family contribute in small ways. There's a paradox here, of course. If my neighbors look exactly like me, I may technically be fulfilling the commandment of ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, loving your neighbor as yourself. But inadvertently, only loving people in my secluded and selective bubble may not be achieving the greater purpose of that commandment. I would certainly feel righteous about myself, but I will, in effect, only stay within my smallest sphere of community to the exclusion of others. And the worst part is I might not even notice who is missing. De Angelis writes, the most profound message of racial segregation may be that the absence of people of color from our lives is no real loss. She reflects, not one person who loved me, guided me, or taught me ever conveyed that segregation deprived me of anything of value. I could live my entire life without a friend or loved one of color, not see that as a diminishment of my life. In fact, she says, my life trajectory would almost certainly ensure that I had few, if any, people of color in my life. When I read that, I felt its truth. It is easy to make excuses or reasons why we avoid doing more, but we need to each do our own part. We are not exempt from doing our work for transformation. As the famous verse in Pirkei Avot says, you are not obligated to complete the task, but neither are you free to neglect it. These are deeply Jewish challenges. How do we see the holiness in others, no matter their race or social status, because we are each B'Tselem Elohim, created in the image of God? We internalize Judaism's values so we can live by them at home and on the streets and throughout our community. We do this at shul so we are better people out in the world. And that's why it's so important that we're together today. So you hear this as an invitation, a challenge, a push, and the possibility that together we can make change. Rabbi David Wolpe teaches in his book, Why Faith Matters, the future of God will depend in part on our openness. Inside of most human beings, he writes, perhaps all, there is a capacity of faith, but embarrassment and mockery can blunt the chance for reverence. Transformation is not easy, but it is so much more meaningful than transactions. The prophet Micah has set the bar high for us, but his words are deceptively simple. God wants us to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly before God. That is transformation. Together we can do meaningful work in this difficult time. While transformation will not immediately end COVID or the hate and division that has overtaken our country, I do believe in the words of the Unatan Atokaf prayer. Tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, ma'avirin et roeg hagazera. That repentance, prayer, and acts of kindness will lessen the severe decree. I will press myself forward towards transformation because this is the type of Judaism that is meaningful and relevant and worth my commitment. At Bethel, we practice becoming the type of people we want to be out in the world. Peter Drucker said, if you're comfortable, it's a sure sign you're doing things wrong. So be uncomfortable with me. Uncomfortable by uncertainty and division, uncomfortable by hate and ugliness, uncomfortable by democracy being stripped away, uncomfortable by not noticing who is not at the table for decisions. Being uncomfortable is part of the process of transformation. So let's lean on Judaism to get through these hard times, and let's commit ourselves to our synagogue, not as a transaction, but as a place of transformation. While you might have come to Bethel because there's a great religious school, the transformation is you and your children learning the skills to live life with courage and conviction. Or you might have come to Bethel because there are lively adult study groups, including the Sam Skolnick Institute and Torah study. But the transformation occurs by being part of serious conversations about Jewish wisdom and how it applies to our life today. Or you might have come to Bethel because there's a tremendous mitzvah day, but the transformation is because you want to make your actions match your values. It's time to practice in here who we want to be out there. So let this day, let this community, let Judaism transform you, and together we can transform the world. We should expect nothing less from our faith. May 5781 be filled with transformation and health, peace and meaning. Shana Tova. And as we transition into the Amidah, we have the youth choir will introduce us into the Amidah on page 125.